Funny how a place changes over time. When I first laid eyes on this house, it was just a dusty plot on a quiet street with more potential than polish. My wife and I had just gotten married, full of hope and plans. Like most young couples back then, we planted roots here, watched the maple trees grow tall, watched our son take his first steps in the living room, celebrated birthdays and anniversaries, even mourned losses, all within these four walls. A lot of life happened on this street. So when the time came to make some changes to the old place, I wasn't thinking about property values or curb appeal. I was thinking about how to welcome my boy home with dignity. The screech of power tools filled my Saturday morning as the construction crew worked on my front porch. I was just stepping outside with coffee for the workers when I heard it. The unmistakable click-clack of expensive heels on pavement accompanied by an indignant gasp that could only belong to one person. What in the name of property values is going on here? The voice cut through the morning air like a rusty saw blade. Patricia Drummond, our HOA president, stood at the edge of my lawn, her perfectly manicured hand clutching a clipboard like it was a weapon. I watched as she marched up my driveway, her face turning progressively redder with each step. "Stop this construction immediately," she barked at the workers, who looked at me uncertainly. "This is an unauthorized modification. You cannot build this monstrosity without HOA approval." She whipped out her phone and began taking photos from every angle, muttering about visual pollution and neighborhood standards. Then she turned to me with a smile that could curdle milk. "Mark Sullivan, I hope you realize you're looking at thousands in fines, daily fines, until this eyesore is removed." What she didn't know was that this so-called eyesore was the only way my son would be able to enter his childhood home again. "My name is Mark Sullivan, and I've lived in this house on Maple Ridge Drive for 22 years. Bought it right after my wife and I got married, back when the neighborhood was just starting to develop. I'm a construction supervisor by trade, or was, until I took early retirement last year to focus on preparing for my son Kyle's return. Kyle enlisted in the Army right out of high school, following in the footsteps of his grandfather and great-grandfather. He was always the kind of kid who wanted to make a difference, to serve something bigger than himself. 3 tours in Afghanistan, and he was supposed to come home for good this Christmas. Instead, I got the call every military parent dreads: IED explosion, critical condition, medevac to Germany, then Walter Reed. The doctors saved his life, but his legs, well, they couldn't save everything. For the past 3 months, I'd been preparing for his homecoming. Widening doorways, installing grab bars, renovating the bathroom. But the most important modification was the ramp, a gentle slope from the driveway to the front door so Kyle could will himself into the house with dignity. I'd kept it simple and tasteful. Nothing flashy, just pressure-treated lumber that matched the house's trim, with proper rails and a non-slip surface. I'd even made sure it complemented the landscaping. But apparently, that wasn't good enough for Patricia Drummond. Patricia moved into the neighborhood 5 years ago and immediately ran for HOA president on a platform of maintaining standards. What that really meant was terrorizing anyone who dared to plant the wrong color flowers or leave their trash cans out an hour too long. She ruled our little subdivision like it was her personal kingdom, armed with a measuring tape and a binder full of bylaws. "This ramp extends beyond the approved porch dimensions," she announced, measuring the structure with theatrical precision. "It alters the front facade of the home, which requires a formal review process that takes 6 to 8 weeks minimum." "Patricia," I said, keeping my voice level despite the anger building in my chest, "my son is coming home from the hospital next week. He needs this ramp to get into the house." She waved her hand dismissively. "Personal circumstances don't override community standards, Mr. Sullivan. You should have thought of that before starting this project. I'm filing a formal violation notice, and you can expect a cease and desist order by Monday." The construction foreman stepped forward. "Ma'am, this ramp meets all ADA requirements. We pulled the proper city permits." "City permits mean nothing here," Patricia interrupted with a practiced sneer. "This is an HOA-governed community. We have standards that go above and beyond municipal codes. She turned back to me. I suggest you halt construction immediately, or the fines will be astronomical, $1,500 per day to start. As she strutted back to her house, several neighbors had emerged to watch the spectacle. I saw sympathy in some faces, fear in others. Everyone knew better than to cross Patricia Drummond. But I didn't care about her threats. My son had sacrificed his legs for this country. The least I could do was make sure he could enter his own home. Over the next few days, Patricia escalated her campaign against my ramp. She sent daily violation notices, each one more dramatically worded than the last. She called emergency HOA board meetings, where she ranted about the dangerous precedent I was setting. She even had her husband, a personal injury lawyer, draft a letter suggesting the ramp was a liability issue. I responded to each attack with documentation, ADA compliance certificates, city permits, letters from Kyle's doctors. Patricia dismissed them all with her favorite phrase, HOA rules supersede everything else. She posted in the neighborhood Facebook group, sharing photos of my ramp from the worst possible angles. This is what happens when we don't enforce standards, she wrote. Today it's one ramp, tomorrow our property values plummet. But Patricia made a crucial mistake. She assumed everyone would automatically side with her, as they usually did out of fear. She didn't count on the quiet network of veterans in our neighborhood or the mothers who understood what it meant to have a child in harm's way. The day Kyle was scheduled to arrive, I woke to find small American flags lining my lawn. My elderly neighbor, a Vietnam vet named Eddie, was tying yellow ribbons around my mailbox. "Heard your boy's coming home," he said simply. Figured he deserved a proper welcome. By noon, word had spread. The ramp was decorated with handmade signs reading, "Welcome home, Kyle," and "A hero lives here." Neighbors I'd barely spoken to in years stopped by with casseroles and offers to help. I was adjusting one of the banners when I heard the familiar click-clack of heels. Patricia appeared with her measuring tape and a thick manila envelope. "Mr. Sullivan, I have here a cease and desist order signed by the HOA board. This ramp must be removed within 72 hours, or we'll begin legal proceedings." "Patricia, please," said Janet Morrison from across the street. "His son is a wounded veteran. Show some compassion." Patricia's voice turned shrill. "Compassion doesn't maintain property values. This ramp is 4 inches wider than code allows and extends 18 inches beyond the approved porch footprint. It's ugly, it's non-conforming, and it's destroying the aesthetic harmony of our street." She was so busy lecturing that she didn't notice the van pulling into my driveway. The driver's side door opened, and a young man in an army uniform stepped out. He walked around to the back, unfolding a wheelchair with practiced efficiency. The entire street fell silent as Kyle transferred himself from the van to the chair. His uniform was immaculate, his posture military straight despite being seated. The Purple Heart and Bronze Star on his chest caught the afternoon sun. Kyle wheeled himself forward, navigating the ramp with smooth precision. He stopped at the top, turned to face the growing crowd, and smiled. "Hi, I'm Kyle Sullivan. I understand there's been some concern about this ramp." Patricia's face had gone pale. She clutched her cease and desist order like a life preserver. "This doesn't change the rules," she stammered. "Ma'am," Kyle said in a calm, respectful tone that somehow commanded absolute attention, "3 months ago, I was on patrol in Kandahar province. An IED took my legs and killed 2 of my squad members. This ramp isn't about breaking rules or destroying property values. It's about being able to enter my father's house without being carried like a child." The silence stretched out, broken only by the sound of Patricia's papers rustling in her shaking hands. Then Eddie started clapping. Slowly, steadily, others joined in until the entire street was applauding. Patricia's face cycled through several shades of red before settling on a mottled purple. "This is... I mean, nobody told me," she stammered, then straightened her shoulders, trying to salvage some authority. "Well, you still should have followed proper procedures. The rules exist for a reason. You're right, Kyle said. Rules do exist for a reason, like the Americans with Disabilities Act, which protects the rights of people like me to have reasonable accommodations. I believe threatening to remove a medically necessary accessibility feature might violate federal law. Janet Morrison stepped forward. I motion for an emergency HOA meeting tonight. 7 p.m. Seconded, called out 3 voices simultaneously. Patricia looked around wildly, seeing the crowd that had gathered. At least 30 neighbors stood in my yard and the street, all staring at her with expressions ranging from disgust to outright anger. Fine, she spat, but don't think emotional manipulation will override proper governance. She retreated to her house, her heels clicking faster than usual. The community center was packed that evening. I'd never seen so many people at an HOA meeting. Usually, it was just Patricia, her hand-picked board members, and whatever poor soul was being fined that month. Kyle insisted on coming, wearing his dress uniform. I faced Taliban fighters, Dad. I think I can handle a suburban HOA president. Patricia called the meeting to order with obvious reluctance. She tried to control the narrative, framing the issue as a simple matter of procedure, but the residents weren't having it. One by one, neighbors stood up to speak. Eddie talked about accessibility and respect for veterans. Janet presented research showing that ADA improvements actually increased home values. A realtor named Susan presented comparisons from other subdivisions with exemptions for accessibility modifications. But the real bombshell came from quiet Margaret Chen, who rarely spoke. I've been keeping records, she said, producing a thick folder. In the past 18 months, Patricia has issued 237 violations. 90% were dismissed after legal threats. She's cost homeowners thousands in unnecessary legal fees. The room erupted. Stories poured out. Harassment over lawn ornaments, Christmas decorations left up a day too long, even the wrong shade of beige on a fence. This isn't about me, Patricia insisted, her voice climbing to a near shriek. This is about standards. Without strict enforcement, this neighborhood will turn into chaos. No, said board member Robert Davidson. This is about power, and you've abused yours for the last time. He turned to the room. I motion to remove Patricia Drummond as HOA president, effective immediately. The vote was unanimous, save for Patricia herself. He continued, I also motion to amend our bylaws to exempt ADA accessibility modifications from HOA approval requirements. Another unanimous vote. Furthermore, Robert said, I motion to review all fines issued in the past year and refund any that were issued without proper cause. Patricia finally found her voice. You can't do this. I'll sue every one of you. My husband is a lawyer. Your husband, said Susan, the realtor, is a personal injury lawyer who's been disbarred twice. I looked him up. The final vote was to elect Janet Morrison as the new HOA president. As the meeting ended, Patricia gathered her papers with shaking hands. She looked around the room, perhaps hoping for one sympathetic face. She found none. This isn't over, she hissed, then stormed out. But it was over. The next morning, code enforcement showed up at Patricia's house. Turns out her backyard gazebo violated several city ordinances she'd conveniently ignored. The fines totaled $1,800. Within a week, a "for sale" sign appeared in her yard. Within 2, her husband was seen loading boxes into a moving truck. The house sold quickly, but I heard from Susan that every potential buyer asked the same question, is this the neighborhood where that HOA president got voted out? As for the ramp, it became something of a landmark. On Veterans Day, it was decorated with flags and flowers. At Christmas, Kyle helped string lights along the rails. Kids chalked messages of thanks on the concrete. What Patricia called an eyesore became a symbol of who we really are. The last time I saw her was at the grocery store. She was arguing with a manager about the placement of shopping carts. Some people never change, but our neighborhood did. Funny how things work better when rules serve people, not the other way around. And Kyle? He started college in the fall, majoring in civil engineering. If I can make just one person's life easier, he told me, then maybe losing my legs meant something. I think about that a lot, watching him navigate that ramp with quiet confidence. That ramp is still there, built to last, just like the bond between neighbors who finally stood up and did what was right. If you believe in standing up for what's right, honoring those who serve, and building stronger communities, be sure to like this video and subscribe to hear more stories that matter. Because sometimes, the smallest act of support can spark real change.